entire tool chain, has been in constant movement, since its inception. And even now, I mean, how long did it take to go from Android 4.4 to Android 4.4.2, which is the current version? It wasn't much time. It's like, bam, bam, it just keeps moving.
How many versions of 4 have there been since a year and a half ago when
Exactly.
Sandwich came out?
Exactly. Well, it's also because of newer devices too. Like the Fitbit would not work for any older Android systems because it relies on low energy Bluetooth. So when these newer devices come out, the operating system has to be upgraded to make use of it. All right. So let's see whether we can pick up from last time. Yep, go ahead.
These are like different API protocols for the different Bluetooth.
I think so. Well, there are two aspects to it. One aspect is, the older Android operating systems, they probably bundle with a kernel, a Linux kernel that does not support Bluetooth 4.0 or the protocols, of Bluetooth 4.0. So as a result, early Android systems, just cannot even detect it because, the underlying operating system does not know how to talk, in Bluetooth 4.0 or using the newer standard. It also has to do with the hardware device too. I'm pretty sure Bluetooth is specific to the hardware. So newer devices just has the necessary hardware to deal with 4.0, and then the older ones do not. So last time we looked at quite a few things but we were trying to get Eclipse to work, but it did not except for the XML. Did anyone watch the entire thing and see if you can reproduce the sequence that actually kind of activated the GUI interface of menuing?
I didn't have that issue, so I couldn't test.
You didn't have the issue?
No. It works normally.
It works normally at home using Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it could be a Java issue too. What about the rest of you guys? Did you guys try it?
In Windows it was just fine.
Okay.
Maybe for Linux, but I'm pretty sure it's a Java issue because whenever I try something that has anything to do with Java and something goes wrong, Eclipse goes. It doesn't stops working normally.
Okay.
I'm almost sure it's a Java issue.
You say Netflix?
Hmm?
You say Netflix?
Netflix?
Eclipse, not that.
Eclipse.
Eclipse. Yep.
What?
All right, so it could be just an issue, but on the other hand, even all of the instructions on Android, as a documentation, they only talk about the XML, documentation because that really is the bottom line. I mean, if the new standard, comes out and the GUI tool is not available, you can always just mess around with the XML file and get whatever you need to get going. Okay. So I'm pretty sure we covered this part, how to add new action items, and the key is inside the file, that is responsible to specify activities, actions, which is now merged with menus. Is basically how to add a new item, and one item goes from the open item tag, and it's basically just one single element in XML, and then in here you can specify all of the attributes related to that particular item. And this is really just a simple one, because if you read the documentation, which we'll do today, is you can specify a lot more fancier type of menu items when you want to create a menu bar, or now it's called the action bar. Are there any questions from last time, from last Wednesday? No questions? All right. This part we have been seeing, since day one. Basically it's just a part of the main activity class. If you use Eclipse to create it, it comes with this code already. And its responsibility is really to inflate the menu system. It loads the menu system using this call here, and then it creates the actual one, and it would use the superclass's own onCreate options menu to finish up the job.
So it's just finishing, not duplicating.
I think it's just finishing it, not duplicating it. Because the superclass doesn't know what menu you want to use, because the superclass has no knowledge whatsoever of the menu that you want to use. So that's why you need the previous line, inflator.inflate. That one let you specify, which menu do you want to load for this particular activity. You can specify, any number of menus in your app, and you can switch it, when you want to. And here it specifies the if room part here. It is highlighted to be different, and it also there's also this part here that is also highlighted. This allows you to specify certain items in your action bar to be displayed on the bar itself instead of inside the menu selection process. So this way, the nice thing is, for more frequently used items, it is just displayed on the bar, and it's easier for people to get to. And then for other ones, you think that people will not need to use most of the time, you can still hide them, inside the menu bar or inside the menu itself instead of on the action bar. Are there any questions about this part? Any questions about what is the action bar and how the menu relates to the action bar? No questions? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Can you prioritize certain items if it's in case some items don't display?
I believe so, because remember last time when we looked at it, there are numbers associated with each menu. So I think that has to do with the prioritization of what to display when there's limited space. If there's not enough room for the item in the action bar, it will appear in the action overflow, which is basically what we usually associate with quote-unquote the menu. So all of this stuff here, they are a big change from the earlier versions of Android, where most Android devices have a hard button for menu. That is completely gone now. I mean, if you look at any newer device, they do not have a menu button anymore. At least it's not a hard button. It's just one place on the screen that can do that. So are there any questions about this? No questions? Okay. Why do you think Android would want people to move away from hard buttons and instead making everything basically soft buttons on the screen?
It can be dynamically changed, plus it's reducing the form factor size.
Yep, it reduces form factor size, and it's also less expensive. And then for applications where you do not want to have menu buttons, you can actually maximize and use more of the screen for the purposes of the app itself. So there are many reasons why people want to do it this way, or why Android wants to do it this way, rather than having hard buttons. Hard buttons are actually more costly too. If you think about it, if you make your screen just slightly larger, the cost factor is very minimal. But when you want to have a button, you have to, the plastic molding of the screen has to be different. And then the other thing is, if you want to make the device more quote-unquote waterproof or more sealed, having buttons is a big no-no. I mean, it just opens up all kinds of possibilities for water and other stuff to get into the device.
And are you just solely mentioning physical buttons or just touch-sensitive buttons?
Both. So there are no fixed location for the menu button or any buttons anymore. And then they talk about the other attribute is with text, and then the with text is basically it explains right here. It is just a hint to the action bar what the text title should appear, basically should display. So it really is just a hint. The icon part is optional but recommended. The icon design recommendation, see the iconography design guide. You can also download a set of standard action bar icons. Search, discard from the downloads page. So basically what this paragraph is talking about is the use of consistent icons is recommended, so that all Android apps would have the same feel and look. When you see the magnifying glass, it's for searching and finding. Okay, and when you see the trash can, is for deleting something or getting rid of something. So this basically gives the Android platform a more consistent look, which is something that is lacking, at least in the earlier versions of Android. And that's why iOS was popular, because when you look at all the iOS applications across the board, they all have the same kind of feel and look. Okay, the same type of icon, the same place for everything. But earlier Android, the earlier Android framework does not have these things. In other words, developers put buttons all over the place, okay, to replicate features that are just some people put a menu button here, some people put a menu button over there, some people would display the search button in a certain way, and other people would do some other things. And what this is trying to do is to unify so that all applications have a similar look and feel, so that end users will have an easier time to learn how to use a particular app. Are there any questions at this point? And then last time we also did an experiment to use always to declare an item will always appear, and we replicated enough times so that we end up with too many things to display on the action bar, and there's no swiping. There's no you don't have an option to swipe on the action bar to show the various items. You just lose things when there's not enough space to display everything. So that's why in this paragraph it also says you should not force an item to appear in the action bar this way. If you just kind of look this way, look in this sentence. Should not is in boldface, which basically says yeah, we kind of leave that option there, but you really should not be using it unless you have a really, really, really good reason to do it. Right? What we did not talk about is how to handle a particular click on the action items. With all the action items on screen, there's only one method to handle every single one, and that particular method is called on options item selected. Okay, so if you have, let's say, 20 items on your menu bar or action bar, if you click on any one of those 20 items, this subroutine gets called from inside your main activity class, or whatever class that is representing your activity. So once you get into this one, you have to use a switch statement or conditional statement of some kind in order to find out which item inside the action bar was actually clicked, was actually activated. So in this case, the code uses a switch statement to do it. So the switch statement takes a look at the ID or the item ID of the item, which is passed as a parameter, and use it inside the switch statement. And then inside the switch statement, it has a case for each and every single one that is being handled. But you can see that the logic of actually handling a particular item is not specified in the switch statement, but instead in the subroutine. So this way the switch statement can be made kind of more simplistic and easier to understand. And then one thing that is also common is it is returning true in each case when the item is actually handled correctly. And this is a protocol because if you look at the return type of on options items selected, on action item selected, it is supposed to return a Boolean. And the Boolean indicates whether the item is actually handled properly or not. So if you return true, it's telling the Android system, okay, this item is now handled properly and no further action is required. The default case here is basically saying, the user has selected an item in the action bar that does not correspond to any one of these handled items. In that case, it is going to invoke the default on options item selected call of the superclass and return whatever the superclass is supposed to return. So if the superclass knows how to handle that particular item, great. If not, it's going to return whatever value the superclass is supposed to return. All right, so do we have any questions up to this point? No questions? Here we have a example of how to use a split action bar. In other words, it splits from the top all the way to the bottom. To enable split action bar when using the support library, you have to do two things. You have to add this particular attribute. All right, hello, I see you again. Okay, so today is our lucky day to do a survey for the college for accreditation purposes. So I'm going to let I cannot remember your name. Sorry, Brenda, to take over at this point. It will take us about 45 minutes or so, and Chris already knows it, to answer the survey. I'm going to stop the recorder for the time being because there's really nothing going on at this point.
We don't have to do it, do we?
Sorry?
We don't have to do it again, do we?